Everything was perfect. Until one night, everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down in a way I never expected. I never saw it coming, but looking back, the signs were always there. It all started like any other evening. I came home from work, tired but content. The day had been long, but there was nothing I loved more than coming back to the warmth of our house, our home. My wife, Gianna, always had dinner ready. She was always there to greet me with a smile that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. We had a routine. She'd tell me about her day, I'd tell her about mine, and we'd laugh, maybe argue about something small, and then go to bed together happy. Felt like we had everything. Perfect marriage, a perfect life. But perfect lives don't always stay that way. I started to notice little things that weren't quite right. First, it was harmless. She'd leave for work earlier than usual, coming back late. Sometimes, her phone would ring, and she'd excuse herself to answer it, always with a strange tone in her voice, like she didn't want me to hear. I convinced myself it was nothing. She was just busy, right? Maybe she was getting promoted at work, or maybe I was just being paranoid. But my gut told me something was wrong. One night, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. I called out to her, but there was no answer. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, until I finally found her. Sitting on the couch, phone in hand. The smile that greeted me wasn't the same. It felt forced, like she was hiding something. But the real shock came later, after dinner, when I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Her phone was left out on the counter. I didn't mean to look. I really didn't. But something about the way she had left it there, face up, caught my attention. I saw a message pop up. It wasn't from her friends or family. It was from someone named David. And the words on the screen hit me like a punch to the gut. I can't wait to see you tonight. We'll make sure no one finds out. I felt like I was frozen in place. My heart was pounding. The pieces of my life, the life I thought I understood, were suddenly shattering around me. David, her boss. That's when I knew. The perfect life I thought we had. It wasn't real. It was all a lie. The worst part about betrayal isn't the moment you find out. It's realizing that everything you thought was real was a lie. I couldn't move. I stood there, staring at that message on Gianna's phone. I can't wait to see you tonight. The words kept echoing in my head, louder and louder, until they drowned out everything else. My hands were shaking. My stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. It was like my whole world had just shifted, and I didn't know how to catch myself. I turned to Gianna, who had been in the other room when I found the message. She came into the kitchen, smiling like everything was fine, her usual cheerful self. The same smile I had seen 1,000 times before, but now it felt like a mask. "Hey, babe, what's up?" she asked, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. My voice barely came out. "Who's David?" I asked, my words trembling with anger and confusion. She froze. Her eyes flickered to the phone on the counter, then quickly darted back to me. I saw her face turn pale, but she didn't say anything at first. The silence between us stretched on, thick with tension. "David's just a coworker," she said, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. It wasn't convincing. "Why do you ask?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger burning through me. "A coworker? Gianna, this isn't just a coworker. This is more." I pointed to the phone. "What does this message mean?" "I can't wait to see you tonight." Her face went blank, like she had been caught in a lie, and she didn't know how to cover it up. Finally, she dropped her gaze. "Look, I didn't want to hurt you, okay? But David, he's more than a coworker. We've been seeing each other for months now." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. For months? My mind couldn't even process it. I had been living in this illusion of a perfect marriage, and now it was all crashing down. I wanted to scream, to rage, but instead, I just stood there, numb. I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Why didn't you tell me? How could you do this to me?" Gianna tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, couldn't touch her. I couldn't even look at her without feeling the weight of the betrayal crushing me. "I'm sorry, okay? But I'm in love with him," she said softly, her voice almost pleading. "You don't understand, but I need him. I can't keep pretending with you anymore." Her words felt like a dagger in my chest. Love? She was in love with him? What about us? What about everything we had built together? All those years, the memories, the promises, gone just like that. And then it hit me. She wasn't just leaving me for David. She was leaving me for someone who had more power, more control. She wasn't even sorry. She didn't even care. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. So I just walked away, out the door, into the cold night, hoping the air would clear my mind. But nothing would ever be the same. My whole world had just shattered, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to seek revenge. But the moment Gianna looked me in the eye and walked out the door with him, something inside me changed. I was no longer the man who let things slide. I was ready to make them pay. I spent the night walking, trying to clear my mind, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Gianna, my wife, she was supposed to be my partner, the one I could trust. And now she was sleeping with him, her boss, a man who had all the power, all the control, and she chose him over me. Felt like my whole life had been a lie. When I came back home the next morning, the house felt hollow. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. The walls, the furniture, the pictures on the walls, they all mocked me, reminding me of a life I thought I had. I wanted answers. I needed them. But more than that, I needed justice. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her get away with this. Couldn't. I stood there in the living room, staring out the window, when it hit me. If Gianna could destroy everything we had for him, then I could destroy everything she had for him, too. I wasn't going to let her walk away scot-free. No, I'd make sure they both lost everything. Her job, her reputation, everything she cared about. And I'd make sure David paid the price, too. I knew I couldn't just go in, guns blazing. I needed a plan. First, I needed to gather information. I spent the next few days keeping a close eye on Gianna. Her movements, her phone calls, the little things she thought she could hide. I started to learn more about David, his routine, his schedule, where he went after work. I even paid a visit to his office. It wasn't easy, but I found out what I needed to know. I knew where he lived, where he hung out, and where he would be vulnerable. I also knew about Gianna's connections. She'd always talked about how much she loved her job, how important her position was. I'd never really understood the full extent of how much power she had. But now, I saw it all clearly. She had built a career out of that job. And David? He had helped her climb the ladder. Now, it was time to use that information against them. I spent sleepless nights planning every detail. I thought about how to expose their affair without leaving a trace. I knew I couldn't just confront them. They'd try to cover it up. No, I needed to tear them apart without them even knowing I was behind it. The more I planned, the more I could feel my anger turning into something else. Something colder, more calculating. Revenge wasn't about rage. It was about precision. And I was going to make sure my revenge was flawless. I wasn't just going to hurt Gianna and David. I was going to destroy their lives, piece by piece. They were going to feel the same way I did, betrayed, heartbroken, and helpless. And then, just when I thought I had everything in place, something unexpected happened. Gianna came to me. She stood at the door, looking hesitant, almost guilty. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I'm with him now. I need you to understand." I stared at her for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I felt anger or pity, maybe both. "You think an apology is going to fix this?" I asked coldly. She looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, just let me explain." But I wasn't listening. I didn't want an explanation. I had a plan, and now nothing would stop me from carrying it out. They thought they could walk away from me without consequences. But I had something far more powerful than anger on my side: strategy. And now it was time to make them pay. The days that followed were like a blur. I barely slept, consumed by the plan I had set in motion. I had all the pieces in place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Something that would change everything. I knew I had to act fast. The longer I waited, the more they'd have time to cover their tracks. I couldn't let that happen. It started with Gianna. I knew she had a big meeting scheduled with her boss, David, and I had the perfect opportunity to strike. The night before, I anonymously sent an email to the company's board members, attaching a video I'd secretly recorded of Gianna and David. It wasn't just a simple video. No, I made sure it showed everything. The way they looked at each other, the stolen glances, the touch of his hand on her back. It was all there. It was undeniable. The email was sent to the top executives, and I made sure they received it first thing in the morning. The timing was perfect. The day Gianna was supposed to shine, she would instead be faced with a scandal that would crush her career. The next step was David. I had done my research and I knew exactly how to get to him. I called in a favor from an old friend who worked at his favorite restaurant. I had them accidentally schedule a reservation under David's name with a fake credit card number. The reservation was confirmed, and the email went straight to David's inbox. It didn't stop there. I started reaching out to everyone I could, old friends of Gianna's, people who'd worked with David in the past. I fed them information, carefully weaving a story that painted them as a power-hungry couple, willing to do anything for success, even destroy lives to get ahead. I didn't care if the truth came out. It didn't matter anymore. They had betrayed me, and now I was going to make sure they paid the price. Then the phone call came. It was Gianna. Her voice shook, panic creeping in. "Did you send that email?" she demanded, barely able to catch her breath. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't hesitate. "You and David have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into," I said, my voice cold. "This is just the beginning." Her silence was all I needed to hear. She knew what was coming. And then it hit me. I had one final move to make, the one that would ensure they both felt the full weight of their actions. I went to the press. I knew a few people who owed me favors, and I fed them a story, one that would blow up on social media, on the news. The affair, the lies, the manipulation, everything. The world would know. The day I saw the headlines, my heart pounded in my chest. Asterisk, top executives affair exposed. Scandal rocks company. Asterisk, the image of Gianna and David was all over the news. Their faces, once so confident, so proud, were now on display for everyone to see. I watched as their lives unraveled, just like mine had. Gianna's phone was blowing up with messages, texts from people at work, friends, family. And David? He was getting calls from his boss, people asking questions, people pulling back their support. The company was already planning to distance itself from him, and the board was furious. It was all happening. They had no idea who had done this, but I could feel the satisfaction building inside me. I wasn't just watching their downfall, I had created it. I had destroyed everything they cared about, just as they had destroyed me. The phone rang again. This time it was David. His voice was filled with panic. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "This isn't over. You hear me? I'm going to make you regret this." I laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "You already regret it," I said. "You just don't know it yet." They had it all: power, success, and everything they ever wanted. But now, in the blink of an eye, it was all slipping away, and I was watching every moment of it. The aftermath of my plan was even more satisfying than I could have imagined. The email, the press leaks, the phone calls, everything came together in a perfect storm. Gianna's career, once thriving, was now in ruins. She had been called into her boss's office, only to be escorted out minutes later, her face pale and trembling. I knew she had no idea how fast her life was spiraling out of control. But David, his world was falling apart too. Everywhere I looked, I saw their names in the news, on blogs, discussed by everyone. The affair had become the talk of the town. David's company was scrambling to fix the damage, distancing themselves from him as quickly as possible. The board members, furious at the scandal, began plotting his removal. And Gianna? Her reputation was tarnished beyond repair. I watched as Gianna's phone lit up with messages and calls. The panic in her eyes when she realized what was happening to her was almost poetic. She couldn't believe what was happening. She had believed she could have it all. David, the job, the life. And now she had nothing. But it didn't stop there. David was getting calls from his lawyer, threats of lawsuits, and demands for explanations. His entire career was under siege. He tried to save himself by apologizing to the public, but it was too late. His words felt empty. He couldn't erase what he had done. His reputation had been shattered, and it wasn't something that could be fixed with a few public apologies. As the days went on, the damage became more obvious. The once confident, powerful couple were now broken, isolated, and scrambling to salvage whatever they could. But it was too late. Their downfall was inevitable, and I had made sure of it. Gianna came to me again, this time alone, desperate. She looked different, worn out, ashamed. She had never looked so small. "You did this, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was clear. "You've ruined everything," she continued, her eyes welling up with tears. "I never thought it would come to this. Please don't do any more damage." I shook my head, my expression cold. "You should have thought about that before you made your choice. Before you decided that he was more important than what we had." Her face crumbled. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice cracking. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it didn't matter. It didn't change anything. The hurt I felt couldn't be erased with words. The trust she had broken, the love she had betrayed, those things didn't just heal with an apology. I stood there, watching her as she tried to gather herself, her emotions swirling. "It's over, Gianna," I said, my voice low but firm. "You made your choice, and now you're going to deal with the consequences. Don't come to me for forgiveness. You don't deserve it." She stood there, speechless, as if trying to find the right words to fix what she had done. But there were no words left. Her world had crumbled around her, and she had no one to blame but herself. Meanwhile, David was falling apart. His image, once polished and flawless, was now smeared with the stain of scandal. He had tried to use his wealth and power to control the situation, but no amount of money could fix what had been broken. His reputation was destroyed, and every attempt to salvage it only made things worse. People had turned on him. The public was unforgiving, and even the people who once admired him were now distancing themselves. He'd been exposed, and there was nothing he could do to stop the fall. The downfall was swift, and every move they made seemed to dig them deeper into the hole they had created. I had watched the whole thing unfold, and while it didn't give me back the life I had lost, it did something else. Something that felt even better. It gave me the satisfaction of knowing they had finally paid for what they had done to me. The tables had turned. I had been the one left broken, but now they were the ones who had lost it all. The powerful, confident couple was now shattered, their reputations destroyed. Their lives were a mess of phone calls, meetings, and public apologies that no one cared to hear. And I was free. I had won. But in the silence that followed, I realized something. Revenge doesn't bring peace. It only leaves behind a hollow emptiness that nothing can fill. It's strange how quickly everything changes. One moment, I was consumed by anger, planning every move, anticipating every detail, eager to watch them both crumble. And the next, when the dust had settled, I was left standing in the wreckage, alone, but not in the way I had expected. The house felt quieter than ever. Gianna had once been my world, her presence filling every room, every corner. Now it felt like the walls themselves were closing in on me. The echoes of laughter, the moments we had shared, they were gone. Even the sound of her voice, the way she'd talk about her day or ask about mine, it all felt so distant. Her absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. David had been a threat, someone who had stolen not just my wife but my dignity. Watching him lose everything was almost anticlimactic. I had imagined his downfall would feel more satisfying, more sweet. But as I watched his name vanish from the headlines and the press move on to the next scandal, I realized it didn't matter anymore. What had I gained? A broken marriage and a ruined career were no compensation for the life we had once shared. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like a man who had won. Instead, I felt empty. But maybe that was the price of revenge. What seemed like a victory was actually just a long, painful reminder of what had been lost. And when the anger fades, all that's left is the quiet reality of living with the aftermath. I found myself reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. Did I deserve to lose Gianna? Was it my fault she had cheated? Or had I failed to see the signs of her discontent? I thought back to the good times, the way we'd laughed together, the plans we'd made, the dreams we had. Had any of that even mattered to her? And what about David? Had he really been in love with her? Or had he simply seen an opportunity to take what was mine? Maybe he had never cared. Maybe it had always been about power, control, and conquest. I couldn't know for sure, but I didn't care to find out. The truth didn't matter as much as the pain he caused. I spent my days in a haze, replaying the past over and over in my mind. But nothing changed. I couldn't bring back the life we had. The relationship, the trust, the future we had once imagined. It was all gone. The betrayal had shattered everything. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. I found myself at the bar, drinking alone, when I struck up a conversation with an old friend. Someone I hadn't seen in years. We talked about the good old days, about life, about everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt heard. And I realized something important. I didn't have to carry this pain alone. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing. I started to take small steps to rebuild my life, starting with myself. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could learn to live with it. I had to forgive myself, let go of the anger, and start moving forward. I realized that, even after everything, I had the power to choose my future. I wasn't defined by what Gianna or David had done to me. I was defined by what I did next. As the weeks passed, I stopped obsessing over them. I stopped checking the news, stopped wondering what they were doing. Their lives, their struggles were no longer mine to worry about. I was moving on, and I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. The bitterness was slowly fading away. But then, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. It was a news article about David, this time not about the scandal but about his attempt to rebuild. He was starting over. He was working hard to salvage his career, his image, and his life. And Gianna? She had taken a different path, too, one that wasn't about fame, about power, but about finding herself again. I realized, then, that we were all broken in our own way. We had all fallen, each of us in a different way, but in the end, we all had to rise again. It wasn't just about what they lost. It was about what we all stood to gain. And that was the real lesson. Revenge had taken everything from me, but it also gave me a chance to rebuild. I could finally be free of the weight of the past and move towards something better. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. In the end, revenge didn't heal my wounds. It just opened my eyes to the one thing I had been blind to all along. The only way forward is to forgive, even if that forgiveness is for yourself. Looking back, I realize how far I've come since that night when everything seemed to fall apart. Revenge, at first, felt like the answer. It was a way to regain control, to take back what I had lost. But as I sit here now, reflecting on everything, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The pain, the heartache, the anger that once drove me. It's all still there, buried deep. But what I've learned through all of this is that holding on to that anger only gives power to the people who hurt you. And as much as I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, it was my own heart that suffered the most. I'm not the same person I was when I first began this journey. I've changed. I've grown. I've learned that real strength comes from letting go. We all face moments in life where we're wronged, betrayed, hurt, but we have a choice. We can let it define us, or we can rise above it. For the longest time, I let my bitterness control me, keeping me chained to a past I couldn't change. But now I choose to look forward, to find peace, and to rebuild what was broken. Not just the life I lost, but the man I am today. You don't have to go down the same path I did. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to destroy their enemies to find peace. There's another way, a better way. The choice to heal, to forgive, and to move on is the most powerful choice you can make. And trust me, it's worth it. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever struggled with the weight of revenge, or if you're just looking for a way out of the pain, I want to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments below, and let's talk about how we can heal together. And if you found something meaningful in this story, if it's helped you see things in a new light, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your journey to healing might inspire someone else to take the first step toward their own. Together, we can all find the strength to move forward.